everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and today I'm working with Global Backyard Industries to show you how to add some cute embellishments to their Ruby and Charley the Cactus amigurumi kits. I should note that these embellishments do not come with the kits. The kits are super cute all on their own, but I'm the type of person who always has to add something to make it my own. So these are things I've added with just some scraps from my stash. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to crochet some eyes and a smile so that you can add a little smiley face to your pot. I'm using some scrap yarn to make the face. I have some black and some white for the eyes, and then I have the red for the mouth. Let's start with the mouth because that's the easiest part. What I'm going to do is make all the pieces separately and then we're going to sew them on. For the mouth, we're just going to do a chain. So let's make a chain of 12 and see how that looks. So there's 1, 2. Oh, I want to show you how I started that. I didn't make a slip knot, and the reason is, especially for something like this, you don't want a knot hanging out at the end, right? So we're just going to make a twist like you would for a slip knot. Notice that my tail yarn is in front, and then we're just going to start crocheting with that loop. There's no need to make a separate slip knot. This is actually a slip knot here, we're just not tightening it. It's called a sloppy slip knot, and it's used a lot in amigurumi because it doesn't give you that little hard knot at the end. So let's make 12 chains. We count that as our first chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's my 12 chains. Let's see how that looks. Okay, I think that looks pretty good actually for the mouth. Let's see. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good for the mouth. So we're going to finish this off, fasten it off, but we're going to leave enough of a tail to sew it in. So I would say 3 times the size at least. So there's 1, 2, 3 times the size. I'm going to even go a little bit more than that and cut just a nice long tail so that I know I'll have enough to sew it in. But I like to go for overkill, so there we have it. That's about how long my tail is right here. And then there's my little smile. So smile is done. Let's do the eyes. We're starting with black for the center of the eye, which is going to be a little hard to see on camera, but it's just 1 round of single crochets to make a little circle. So I don't do a slip knot. You're welcome to do a slip knot if you prefer, but I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to work 6 single crochet into that second chain from the hook. So the first chain that we made. 1, 2, 3, get the tail out of the way, 4, oh, I said get it out of the way and it goes right on my hook, doesn't it? 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and now I'm going to join this with a slip stitch, which is really hard to see because of the black yarn, but that's unfortunately the downside of working with black. And then I'm just going to cut and fasten off. Fasten off. And I'm tightening up my starting chain as well by pulling on the tail. And there we have the center of the eye. So join your white in any stitch along the outside of your circle, and we're working in back loops only. So join in the back loop only. Just pull a loop through, and then we're going to do a chain with that. And I like to kind of tuck the tail under just to lock it in place. So now we've joined our white, and we're going to work the white of the eye, which is kind of egg-shaped. So for the first 3 stitches, and this is going to be along the bottom of the eye, we're going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch. So that is 1 and 2 into this stitch, 3, 4, and then the next stitch. And remember, we're working in back loops only, so 5, 6, and that's the bottom of our eye. We started with 6 stitches on the first round, and we've worked into 3 of them. So now we have 3 stitches left to work into. So for the 2 side stitches, we're going to do half double crochets, and then when we get to the top, we're going to do some double crochets. So for these, I'm going to do 2 half double crochets in the side stitch. And again, back loop only. We're always back loop only here. So 1, 2, and now to round off the top really nicely, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half double crochet, then 3 double crochets, and then another half double crochet. So getting to the top stitch here, half double crochet, then 3 double crochets, and then a half double crochet. Okay, and you can see that gets us kind of that egg shape. Now we're going to go into this last stitch here, and we're going to do the 2 half double crochets just like we did on the other side. 1, 2, and we're going to join, but I'm going to do a seamless join. So I'm actually going to just fasten this off and leave quite a long tail because I'm going to use that to sew this on later. Okay. To do the seamless join, what we do is we take our yarn needle and go ahead and thread this yarn onto the yarn needle. And I've just fastened off. So I fastened off and I thread this onto the yarn needle. And now we're going to mimic this stitch and create a stitch connecting to here. So you can see when you look at these stitches, it comes out of the previous stitch, goes around underneath the next stitch, and then goes back down into the center of the previous stitch. So that's what we're going to do. We're coming out of the center of the previous stitch. Now we're going to go around and underneath this stitch, both legs, okay? Pull it through. And then we're going to go back down into the center of the previous stitch. And when I do that, I like to come out the back and tuck it in under a loop back here as well. Okay? And now we have a join that looks much more seamless. There's no bump or lump except for our starting chain. There we go. There's no bump or lump, and we have a nice seamless join, and there is our eye. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another eye. We're going to weave in all of the ends except for this big long one. But when we weave in the little white end, I'm going to show you a little trick. We're going to put the little highlight into the eye before we start weaving it in. So look at your eye from the front and see where you would like a little highlight to be. And I think I'd like the little highlight to be right about here. So before I start weaving in my tail, I'm just going to come up somewhere over here. Okay, make sure I'm not catching anything in the back here. And then come down right next to it, right over here. And that gives me just that little highlight. And I think that adds some depth to the eye. So that gives me a little highlight, and now I'm going to weave in the tail like I normally would. I'm going to weave in the 2 black tails and make another eye, and then I'll pick it up from there. I finished sewing on one of the eyes, and I've pinned the other eye into place, ready to be sewn on. I pulled the long tail out through the front, and you can see everything else has been woven in. So now let's sew on this eye. And I'm going to use a back stitch, which means basically I go back a stitch and then go forward a stitch. So first I'm going to go back to this previous stitch, and notice the little V's on top. I want to keep that intact. See how pretty that looks? So I'm going to be working underneath those V's as I go around. So I'm coming out from this one here, if you can see that stitch. So I'm going to go in this one. So I'm going back one, and then I'm coming out of the next one, which is here. Okay, so it's back one stitch and then forward to the next stitch. And then because I'm going back one stitch, that's exactly where I came out of last time, so it keeps going back on itself like that. So go in where I came out of, and then skip the one that I'm in right now and go forward to the next one. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way around this eye. When I get to where the pin is pinching it and distorting it, then I will remove the pin, which is probably right about now actually. The pin is just there for the beginning, and then you can, once you've got a couple stitches in place, you can just hold it with your finger and make sure that you're putting everything exactly where you want it. I've gone all the way around and I'm ready to weave in the end. And sometimes when you're weaving in the ends, you can cover up some mistakes. Like, do you see this little black spot here? That came from when I was weaving in the tails, and I got into the white portion by mistake. So when I weave in this tail, I'm going to go over that spot. So I'm just going through some of the stitches and I'm coming out next to that spot. And then I'm going to go down over that spot and come back out the other way. And you'll see that spot will just disappear. There we go. That looks much better, right? Never know I made that mistake. So now I'm just going to keep going, weaving in underneath the other stitches, catching some of the pot underneath as I go. And once I feel like it's pretty secure, then what I'm going to do is go in near where I am and come all the way out the back of the pot. And you're going to have to squeeze the pot to do this, but come all the way out the back. Before I pull, I'm going to tug on this pot and squish it back into shape because I want to make sure that I'm not pinching it anywhere or creating any dimples. So here's where it goes in, and in fact you can see a little bit of a dimple. So I'm tugging it back out. There we go. Everything's nice in shape. Now I'm very gently going to pull up on this, cut it as close as I can, and when I cut it, it'll suck back in. See? It just sucked right back in because I had pulled on it gently. And now the end is hidden. So there's the eyes. Now let's do the mouth. And again, I'm going to pin that into place where I want it. For the mouth, to get it nice and centered, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half and mark where my center is. So my center is right there. When I pin it in place, I want the side with the V shapes to be on top, not the side with the bumps. That's the back end. So I want the V shapes to be on top, and this is my center. So I put my center where I want it and pin that in place. Now it's very easy for me to pin the ends in place, and I'm going to look at what row I end up on here and make sure I end up on the same row on the other side. That'll give me a nice symmetric smile. So here I've ended up here on this row, and I'm going to go across to here and make sure that I end up there on this row. Okay, now I have a nice centered symmetric smile, and I'm going to start sewing it in. I'm going to take my long tail and attach it to my needle. And I'm still using a back stitch, but this time I'm going to go down through the middle of the stitches. Before I start, I'm actually going to make that little, you know the little lines that you have at the edges of a smile? I'm going to make that first. So to make that, I go to the side slightly and then out to the other side. Okay, and then I'm going to catch this diagonal line. See how that made the diagonal line? I'm going to stick my needle under that and come right down in the middle. And that's going to center it. And then let's move our pin and come up into the first stitch. So now I've centered that and I'm coming up, not the first stitch, come up in the second stitch because we need a stitch to go back into. And now you can see I've made that nice little dimpled edge for the smile, that little T shape. So now I go back into my first stitch, make sure I'm putting it where I want it, and sorry, I've got my tail caught up in here. There we go. So back stitch, and we're going in the center of the stitches. So go back into the first stitch, put it where I want it, there. Oops, it's a little slippery on me. There we go. And then come back out the next stitch. And now that looks perfect, right? So go back one stitch and then forward one stitch. Back one stitch, forward one stitch. Always working into the center of the V's as we do this smile. When you come to the pins, you can take them out. There we go. Back one stitch, forward one stitch. Just a couple more to do, so I'm pulling out that pin. Now the reason that I didn't weave in this other end is because weaving in the end into the thin chain can make it look a little bulky. So I'm going to weave that end into the pot behind the chain so that I'm not making the chain itself look bulky. Now I've come to the other end, make sure everything looks good, and then we'll put the little edge on this side of the smile. So again, I'm coming down and up at the side, catch that little diagonal line and bring it back down into the middle. And once I've done that, then I can just bring this up randomly somewhere and start weaving in the ends. So I've got the little T shape on both sides. This one pulled a little tight, so I'm going to loosen it. There we go. And weave in my ends underneath all these stitches. And then once it's secure, just like I did for the other side, or for the eyes, I can push it down and through. Okay, pull it out. Make sure it's not pinched, which it is, so I gotta loosen it. Make sure it's not pinched, and then pull it slightly and trim so it sucks back in. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing with the other tail. And there we are. Everything's woven in, and our cute little cactus has a beautiful smile. Now I could have done the smile itself, the actual smile, with surface crochet, just like I did for the edging on the other one that I showed you in a previous tutorial. That's a perfectly acceptable way to do the smile as well. Remember to run a guideline in first with some floss or thread so that you can follow along when you're actually doing the surface crochet. You can also add any other embellishments you want, like a nose or eyelashes, but now you have a face to play with. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.